My name is Jordan Brown. I'm the Director of Sustainable Development at Runbrook. We are sort of a one-stop shop for all of your sustainability consulting needs. We have a consulting side, which is what I'm a part of, that deals with LEED certification, National Green Building Standards certification, FGBC certification, et cetera. And then we also have a testing side, so for blower door testing, as well as in-field testing. And we also do some tax incentive consulting as well. So first of all, we want to talk about the sort of key drivers of a changing green building industry. And so the green building industry, as you probably know, is constantly evolving. And so these are the 5 big ones that have been shifting it lately. The first is COVID-19. The second is electrification, and then resilience, and then embodied carbon, which may be a phrase that not many people have heard before, but we'll get into and you'll learn a little bit more, and then equity and inclusion. So first, COVID-19 really showed a lot of weaknesses in the market, not only from an economic perspective, but also in the ways that we construct our buildings. 90%, on average, 90% of our time is spent indoors. And so what does that mean? So for something like COVID-19 that is an airborne disease or illness, it means that if you do not have proper ventilation in your spaces, you are more likely to catch not only COVID-19, but other illnesses. And so that leads to, and poor indoor air quality leads to higher risk of getting sick, also something called a sick building syndrome, which means if your building is not properly ventilated, you're more likely to get sick more often in your building, in the building if you're occupying it pretty often. So what I've been seeing lately as a consultant is rather than people, like for example, apartment complexes or office buildings advertising fancy amenities like a rooftop pool or, giant windows or whatever, they're sort of advertising high quality air filters. So we would see MERV 13 filters are some of the highest quality filters that you can install in your building. So they're sort of advertising that to clients, and because of COVID-19 and this hyper awareness of health, we're seeing more and more people becoming interested in how can we make our buildings better for us. And so then that leads to people having a greater interest in health and well-being focused procedures and policies that are in place in the buildings that they occupy. So not only your apartment complex, but the office building that you may go to work in every day and you're working 40 hours a week out of. Or maybe if you're going to a restaurant with your family, you don't want to go somewhere that's poorly ventilated, hot, and has terrible thermal comfort. You want something that you feel comfortable in and are confident that it is a safe place for you to be. And then that leads to a rising interest in the WELL building standard. So many people may have heard of LEED, which is a building certification mostly based on energy efficiency. WELL is actually wants to sort of identify buildings that are exceeding in wellness in their building. So improved indoor air quality, improved water filtering, access to outdoor spaces. What kind of health and wellness policies are the people who own this building engaging in? Are they providing mental health accommodations for their employees, things like that? The next is electrification. So in order to eventually get to a future in which we can predominantly use renewable energy, that's going to require this transition to electrification. And so the green building industry has for a long time been focusing on decarbonization. And in the past, that used to mean getting CO2 or getting carbon down, but then it also transitions to moving away from all fossil fuels, especially at a building level. So improving the connectivity to the grid and the resilience of these buildings. And so electrification paired with greater efficiency in these buildings will lead to a more resilient building and a more resilient grid overall. And so then that leads into a greater focus and more rewards for what's called regenerative design. So homes with solar panels or homes that are water positive, meaning that, for example, there's a home that our company has where they have a system that actually pulls water out of the air and creates fresh drinking water for the home. And this is really important because this home is located in Miami Beach, and we have hurricanes all of the time, and with connection to, because a lot of our water comes from this municipal sewer system or municipal water system, if for whatever reason that water becomes contaminated, a lot of people have no way to get fresh water other than storing gallons of water in their home. Well, this family has a system that can pull 20 gallons of water, 20 gallons of drinking water a day just out of the air. And so that's also a resilience measure, and as well as a regenerative measure. So then that leads us into resilience. And so more and more we're seeing these green building certifications such as RELI and PEER that are specifically focused on rewarding people who are building for resilience and having doing proactive design planning and construction. So this means improved rainwater management, flood control, as Zorana was talking about in her presentation as well. Landscape maintenance, making sure that you are installing plants that not only keep water on site, but also are cohesive with the natural ecosystem that is around, that is the area that your building is being built in. Improving the grid, so specifically the PEER certification focuses on how strong and how resilient your grid systems are, and it specifically focuses on power plants and energy generation systems. And then even in LEED and the Sustainable Sites certification, they are also in pilot credits, as well as there's a new version of LEED coming out later this year. And I have suspicions that it's going to start rewarding resilient design more and more, because we're coming to find that the most sustainable building that you can build is the one that can last a long time, and the one that can easily adapt to the environment that it exists in. And so as we move forward, we're going to see more and more of these adaptable buildings, buildings that can adapt to the environment that they exist in. And then another big one is going to be in embodied carbon. So a lot of people are very familiar with what's called operational carbon. So building a really efficient building, having a very efficient mechanical system. That is only one tiny piece of the pie when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. So the green building industry got really good at mitigating operational carbon, and then sort of forgot about embodied carbon. So what is embodied carbon? All of the materials that it takes to build your building, how do they get to you? Transportation, manufacturing, extraction. What are the carbon emissions associated with that product that you're installing at every stage of its life? And one way that you can sort of calculate this is via what's called a life cycle analysis. And life cycle analyses for specific products have been around for a very long time. If anyone's familiar with environmental product declarations, those have a life cycle aspect to them, as well as health product declarations have a chemical analysis part of them as well. And so what the response from the green building industry, particularly LEED, is what's called a building life cycle assessment. And so these assessments allow you throughout the process of material selection, you can start doing this life cycle assessment and sort of say, oh, if we install these wood walls or these wood panelings as opposed to metal paneling, we have a significant decrease in the amount of carbon that is embodied within our building. And then that leads sort of into the equity and inclusion aspect. I'm a big fan of the show The Good Place. So this is a quote from that show that I think pretty much sums up what I mean by this. It says, life is now so complicated, it feels impossible for anyone to be good enough. These days, just buying a tomato at the grocery store means you're unwittingly supporting toxic pesticides, exploited labor, contributing to global warming. People think they're making one choice, but they're actually making dozens of choices they don't even know they're making. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our supply chain is extremely poor when it comes to transparency. There's still slavery that exists in the supply chain in 2023. It may not be in front of our face in the United States, or some place it is in the United States with immigrants being exploited for their labor, as well as like in other countries, people are exploited for their labor. So what the next step for materials, so it's in the green building industry, we've got a handle on what we need to track environmentally wise for these materials, but what can we do to ensure that we're making a sustainable future for everybody? That goes back to the intersections of sustainability. How sustainable is a building if it took the exploitation of thousands of people to construct it? Not super sustainable, if you ask me. So, and then aside from just purely the material aspect, we're also seeing the green building industry having larger discussions about for example, worker rights, and who are making up the project teams for these buildings. And so they're rewarding project teams that are not only diverse, but also are taking into consideration their impact on the community and taking into consideration the opinions of the people who already live in the community in which these buildings are being built. So how are specifically green building certifications changing? So you've heard me talk about LEED a little bit. USGBC and UWBI, so USGBC is the United States Green Building Council, UWBI is the International Well Building Institute. They have recently created a joint submission path. So people who are already pursuing LEED or WELL certification now have an opportunity to also pursue certification for the other one. So if you're pursuing a LEED certification, you now have a more streamlined approach to also achieve WELL certification. And then what that indicates to us is that there's going to be more and more synergies between these different certifications. And like the diagram that Jim showed, that we're going to start seeing a more and more cohesive approach to sustainability. It's not just energy efficiency, it's got to be the people aspect as well. LEED specifically is changing its its energy requirements and materials credits. So actually in May or June, we're gonna see a major change to the energy requirements for buildings that are pursuing certification. Previously, the prerequisite was a 5% reduction from reduction from baseline for energy use, and that's probably gonna jump to about 15%, and it's just going to get harder and harder to earn points in the certification. LEED is also pushing for electrification, and it's having a greater focus on not only carbon emissions and having a building that's technically efficient, but then still uses fossil fuels, such as natural gas. They're starting to move away from encouraging people to go with these natural gas-based mechanical systems. And so we're sort of expecting it to become a prerequisite in the future that if you're going to be someone who wants a LEED certified building, no fossil fuels are going to be allowed to be used in your building, except for maybe, for example, a generator. Then further, third-party verification of manufacturer reporting for materials. So as it is right now, you can, as a manufacturer, produce an EPD or an HPD, environmental product declaration, health product declaration, and it doesn't necessarily have to be verified by a third party, but more and more we're seeing that they're going to start requiring that third party verification. And it's in everybody's best interest because sometimes companies lie just to get ahead. And so we want that third party verification to make sure people are doing what they actually say they're doing. And then we're also going to probably see more detailed reporting of material content and the supply chain makeup, going back to what I was saying about equity and inclusion. We want to know where our products are coming from. We live in such a disconnected society. We don't even know where our tomato came from. So how can we expect to know where the floor that we're standing on came from, or the carpet tiles, or every single aspect, every single ingredient in your products for your home and for your buildings. There's also going to be pilot credits in both WELL and the LEED certifications that are rewarding designing for resilience. And then in a larger scale, there's going to be a greater focus from these certifications on existing building retrofit and renovation. It's really easy to go to somebody who is building a new building and to get them to build efficiently, but it's significantly harder to go to somebody who has a building that's already built and tell them that you need to retrofit it and get it to be more efficient. A statistic that I learned that really stands out to me and that I regurgitate to everybody that I know is 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2040 have already been built. So what are we doing about them? If we're really trying to meet our energy goals by 2030, 2040, 2050, what are we doing to get everybody to where we need them to be, even the buildings that already exist? So if I encourage everyone here to sort of get ahead of the curve, especially if they're considering building a building or investing in a developer or something like that. There's latest federal guidance the latest federal guidance for federal buildings and the performance of federal buildings is shifting towards electrification and decarbonization. So I always like to say, if the federal government is ahead of you, you're already behind. So I would encourage everybody to read the Federal Building Performance Standard if you're looking to see what the federal government is requiring and sort of get ahead, especially if it's federal buildings, next is going to be state, et cetera. And especially as these 2030, 2040, 2050 deadlines are getting closer, there's more and more pressure on municipalities to start creating ordinances to require all new construction to fall in line with sustainability goals. So you might as well just get ahead of the curve now and start creating a process in which you can easily design and construct a building that meets these standards, so you don't have to go back in time. And then touching back to the resilience aspect, if you invest and you plan now, you're going to protect your asset and your wallet later. So it's going to cost way more money for you to go back and fix something than to just do it right the first time. And thank you so much.